What happens when a harmless question on live television pushes one of Hollywood's calmest, most controlled stars straight to his limit? What unfolds when a famously steady Ryan Gosling suddenly drops the charm and loses his cool? Before we unravel this shocking on-air moment, stay locked in. What you're about to hear will change the way you see him forever. But first, don't forget to subscribe to Talk Narrative. Hit that like button and leave a comment below. Your support fuels every dramatic story we bring to life. The studio of The View shimmered under its signature golden lighting that morning, so bright it softened the faces in the audience into a glowing haze. Applause washed across the room as Ryan Gosling stepped out, wearing that easy, practiced half-smile he's become known for, a smile that always makes it seem like he's privy to a secret no one else has caught yet. He greeted the host politely, shook a couple hands, and settled into the chair between Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar. Everything about the scene felt calm, almost too calm, the kind of calm that rarely survives long on The View. And that's exactly where the tension began to simmer. The conversation opened light and breezy. Whoopi asked about his upcoming movie. Sarah Haynes tossed in a fun remark about his outfit. Sunny Hassan brought up the delicate balance between parenting and career. Ryan answered each with his signature warmth, sprinkling in humor, offering gentle charm, and giving the audience exactly what they expected from the polished film star. But while he played along effortlessly, someone at the table wasn't matching that tone. Joy Behar sat angled toward him, her body language tight, her gaze sharp, curious in a way that felt loaded, not unkind, but pointed. It was the posture of someone who had come prepared with a question that cuts deeper than the rest. And as Ryan continued chatting, unaware of the shift taking place inches from him, Joy finally leaned back, took a breath, slid her glasses higher on her nose, and spoke in a tone that made the other hosts glance at her in warning. "All right, Ryan," she said calmly. "I've got something a bit personal." Ryan paused, still smiling, but now alert. "Okay, what's up?" Then Joy dropped it, blunt and heavy. "You've played all these emotional, romantic leading men. But people say that off camera, you're actually distant, that you avoid conflict, walk away from it. So tell us honestly, is that the reason some of your past relationships didn't work out?" A ripple of gasps swept through the audience. Whoopi snapped her head toward Joy, eyes wide, silently saying exactly what everyone else was thinking. "What are you doing?" Sarah blurted out before catching herself, her mouth opening and closing like she wasn't sure she had permission to question the moment. Sunny shifted uneasily in her seat, clearly wishing the conversation would steer back into safer waters. Ryan, however, didn't react right away. Not outwardly. His expression stalled, like a frozen frame, caught between polite amusement and dawning disbelief. It was the kind of pause that told you he was still waiting for the punchline that wasn't coming. And that pause was all it took for the room to tilt. A low wave of murmurs washed through the audience. People leaned in. The air felt like it had tightened an inch around everyone's shoulders. Joy, noticing the reaction, sensed she'd struck a nerve, and she didn't back off. She tilted her head and added casually, "It's a fair question. Fans want to know who the real Ryan is." And with that one extra nudge, the temperature on set dropped another degree. Ryan took a slow breath, the kind reserved for moments when someone is trying to stop instinct from taking over. His jaw flexed just once, so quick most would have missed it. But that tiny shift said everything. He looked at Joy, then away, then back again. The signature smile had vanished. Not faded, disappeared. "Well," he said, voice controlled, "that's pretty personal." Joy didn't step back. "So is acting," she countered. "You give your emotions to millions. Why not give him an honest answer right now?" Whoopi tried to intervene. "Joy." But Joy cut across her without hesitation. "I'm asking what viewers want to know." Gasps scattered around the room. The audience hovered between shock and fascination, the exact emotional cocktail that comes right before live television turns chaotic. And that's when Ryan shifted, just slightly, but enough to signal something had changed. He leaned back, eyes narrowing, his usual calm exterior peeling away in thin, controlled layers. He didn't look angry. He looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe the conversation had taken this turn. Then he locked eyes with Joy. Are you asking about the characters I play? He said slowly. Or are you trying to dissect my personal life on national television? Joy lifted a shoulder in a casual shrug. Sometimes they're the same thing. The atmosphere snapped tighter, like a wire finally reaching its breaking point. You could practically feel the tension hum across the table. Ryan exhaled sharply and squared his shoulders. Something inside him, something he normally disguises with charm, rose to the surface. His voice came out lower, firmer, carved with precision. Joy, you don't get to decide who I am off camera. And you definitely don't get to turn my personal life into a spectacle. Joy's eyes flickered in surprise. The table froze. Whoopi lifted her eyebrows. Sarah covered her mouth. Sonny whispered, Wow. But the moment wasn't over, not even close. Ryan continued, still calm, but with a charge beneath every word. You're asking about things you have no real insight into. And to imply that my past relationships failed because I'm some kind of emotionally detached person? Ryan continued, his voice low but razor steady. You don't know me. You don't know the people involved. You don't know anything beyond internet gossip and tabloid headlines. That's not reporting. That's not even curiosity. That's crossing a line. A wave of shock rippled through the studio. People leaned forward as if pulled by gravity. A few phones lifted discreetly. Glasses tilted. Whispers buzzed around the edges of the set like static. Joy sat a little straighter, a flash of indignation crossing her face. It was a question, she insisted. That's the show. That's what we do. Ryan turned his head slowly, disbelief written across every angle of his posture. No, he said softly. What you do is push until someone reacts. But this, he motioned between the two of them, his voice tightening. This isn't about curiosity. This is you using a stereotype to paint me as something I'm not. Joy rolled her eyes ever so slightly, trying to snatch back control of the room. Come on, Ryan. People want authenticity. And that tiny, dismissive remark was a spark that finally ignited what he'd been holding back. Ryan leaned forward, resting both elbows on the table, locking in on her with unwavering intensity. You want authenticity? He said. Fine. Here it is. You don't get to toss out accusations about someone's emotional depth like it's a punchline. You don't know what anyone lives through privately. And you definitely don't get to boil down my entire personal life into one disrespectful question just to stir up a reaction. The audience gasped again, louder, fuller, like the entire room had been thrown forward. Joy's face flushed a deep, uneasy red. She fiddled with her glasses, as if the lights had suddenly doubled in heat. And in that instant, the show didn't feel like lively daytime TV anymore. It felt like a sealed chamber where pressure kept building with every breath. Ryan's voice softened, but only in volume, not intensity. You cross a line, he said, and you know it. Silence spread across the set. Heavy, electric, the kind of silence that signals the start of something bigger than the moment itself. The kind of silence that the internet devours, slowly, obsessively, clip by clip. And this was only the start. Joy didn't answer immediately. Her lips tightened. Her fingertips tapped nervously along the edge of the table, as though she were searching for stability. The atmosphere in the room had changed. Thick, unsettled, charged. The audience was so still the faint hum of a stage light seemed suddenly loud. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged wide-eyed looks. A few whispered urgently into headsets, unsure whether to cut to commercial or, dangerously, let whatever was coming next play out live. Ryan didn't so much as blink. His gaze stayed fixed ahead, his jaw firm, not with anger, but with a quiet, cutting disappointment. And that expression alone did more damage than any raised voice ever could. You could see Joy falter. Her confidence slipped for a fraction of a second, her eyes blinking faster than usual, a tiny tell, but enough for the entire audience to catch. Whoopi finally stepped in, her tone calm but edged with warning. All right, now, let's all take a moment. Remember, this is live television. But her attempt to cool the room barely dented the tension. The moment had crossed the threshold, and nothing was easing it back. Ryan leaned against his chair, breathing out through his nose as if forcing himself to settle. The crowd watched with an almost reverent stillness, Hollywood's famously unshakable leading man grappling visibly with restraint. Joy cleared her throat and tried to plaster on a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Listen, Ryan, I wasn't trying to upset you. It's a talk show. We ask difficult questions." Ryan turned back to her, his expression steady but unmistakably firm. His tone carried more weight than anger ever could. There's a difference between a tough question and a personal assumption wrapped up like it's journalism. Joy stiffened, her shoulders tightening. "Okay, so you didn't like the premise. Fine, but I didn't say anything people haven't discussed publicly. And that's the problem," Ryan answered, voice cool but deeply pointed. "A rumor appears online, and suddenly you think it gives you permission to define a whole person." A few audience members clapped, just a sprinkle of applause, but loud enough to cut through the air. Joy shot a sharp glance toward them, irritation flashing before she turned back. "People are curious," she insisted. "That's all." "Curiosity is fine," Ryan replied. "Disrespect isn't." Whoopi winced subtly, the way someone reacts when they witness a glass slip off a counter in slow motion. Sarah shifted uneasily, inching back from the invisible storm between them. Sonny watched the exchange with sharp, discerning intensity, fully aware that this type of moment could explode across social media within minutes. Trying to reclaim control, Joy gestured broadly toward the audience. "Come on, everyone. We follow celebrities because we want to know what drives them. That's the business you're in, Ryan." Ryan shook his head, calm but unwavering. "No, the business I'm in is storytelling. What you're doing right now, that's something else entirely." The audience murmured again, louder this time, a rolling wave of whispers signaling something unmistakable. They were choosing sides. Joy let out a laugh, but it was sharp and hollow, more defense than humor. "Oh, come on," she said. "Don't pretend you're somehow above the industry you work in." "I'm not above anything," Ryan replied, leaning in slightly. His tone was steady, measured. "But I am allowed to draw a line. And you crossed it." This time, the audience didn't hold back. Applause burst through the studio. Full, deliberate, unmistakably supportive. Joy's shoulders tightened. Sonny finally spoke, her voice gentle but unmistakably direct. "Joy, maybe the question sounded harsher than you meant it to." "Harsher," Joy shot back. "It was honest." "No," Sarah cut in quietly but firmly. "It was intrusive." Joy stared down at the table, her expression flickering between frustration and disbelief. Shaken not only by Ryan, but by her own co-host turning the mirror toward her. Ryan's tone softened, but the intensity in his eyes never wavered. "I understand this show thrives on strong conversations. I get that big moments make headlines. But when you treat someone's personal life like a punchline, you're talking about real people, real history, real feelings." Joy scoffed under her breath. "You're a public figure. Everything's fair game." Ryan's expression tightened, not with anger, but with something rawer. "My kids aren't fair game. My private life isn't fair game. And reducing my worth as a partner or a father to some rumor you skimmed online, that's not journalism. That's cruelty pretending to be curiosity." The studio fell completely still. Even the producers froze behind the cameras. Joy opened her mouth, shut it, then tried again, searching for a defense she suddenly didn't have. She'd expected him to dodge, to laugh, to shrug it off like so many actors before him. But Ryan wasn't playing the usual game. Not today. Whoopi took a slow breath. "All right, let's all take a step back. We don't need a full-on war breaking out at the table." But it was too late. The moment had already turned into something deeper, something unfiltered and unmistakably real. Everyone at that table felt it. "You know what?" Joy blurted suddenly. Her voice tipped slightly higher, a telltale sign she felt backed into a corner. "Maybe you're overreacting, Ryan. It was just a question." Ryan didn't snap back. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush to defend himself. He simply let the quiet disappointment sit between them, heavy and unmistakable. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, but devastating. "I'm reacting like a human being," he said. Something you sometimes forget celebrities still are. The room exploded. Cheers, gasps, applause shaking the studio walls. Laughter, shock, applause. Everything hit the room at once. Not ridicule, not mockery, but a surge of support that swept across the studio like a wave breaking open. It was as if the entire audience exhaled at the same time and openly sided with a man who almost never let the public see this much fire. Joy blinked hard, thrown off by how quickly the crowd shifted away from her. Sarah reached over and lightly rested a hand on Ryan's arm, a simple, steady gesture that spoke volumes. "You handled that with a lot of grace," she murmured, unaware that her mic carried the words clearly. Ryan gave a small, subdued smile, polite, controlled, but didn't touch his eyes. Joy leaned back in her seat, folding her arms in irritation. She tried, unsuccessfully, to hide. "Well," she muttered, "guess I'm the villain of the day." Whoopi let out a weary sigh, rubbing her temples. There are no villains here, just different viewpoints. But the room knew better. Everyone had felt it. The moment a boundary was crossed and then firmly rebuilt. Ryan, still composed but undeniably shifted by everything that had unfolded, looked toward the cameras. Something flickered behind his eyes, something decisive, something the audience wasn't prepared for. He turned back to Joy. "For the record," he said quietly, "I didn't show up here to argue. I came to talk about my work. But if you're going to interrogate me about my personal life, then let's not pretend we're having a normal conversation anymore." Joy stared at him, startled. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ryan's reply came slowly, controlled, deliberate. "It means this isn't over." A hush swept across the room. A deep, unforgettable hush. The kind of silence that becomes a timestamp in people's memories. A silence that says, this is the moment the internet will replay 1,000,000 times. The tension wrapped around the studio like dense fog, thick, unmoving, impossible to escape. Audience members murmured in hushed tones, unsure whether they should lean closer or hold perfectly still. Joy adjusted her posture, straightening her back as though bracing herself for impact, while Ryan stared straight ahead. The storm building behind his eyes was taking shape. Whoopi sensed it instantly. The shift in air, the danger humming underneath, the split second before a live broadcast spirals. She leaned forward, hands flat on the table, taking command. "All right," she said, voice firm. "Everybody take a breath. We have a great guest, a great show, and I'm not letting this derail." But neither of them looked away. Ryan kept his eyes locked on Joy. Joy kept hers locked on him. The moment was already past the point of recovery. Joy tried to soften her tone, but the strain in her voice betrayed her. "Ryan, you're acting like I'm some kind of villain here." "I never said that," Ryan interrupted, his voice almost unnervingly calm. The studio erupted. Laughter, sharp breaths, and a wave of applause rolled through the room like a sudden storm. But it wasn't ridicule. It felt like the entire audience had chosen a side in an instant, and they weren't standing with the person they expected to. Joy blinked rapidly, thrown off by the room's reaction. Beside Ryan, Sia rested a gentle hand on his arm. Quiet, steady reassurance. "You handled that with a lot of grace," she murmured, unaware her mic caught every word. Ryan gave her a small, fleeting smile that never reached his eyes. Joy leaned back with her arms crossed, irritation flickering beneath a thin layer of composure. "Well, I guess I'm today's villain," she muttered. Whoopi pressed her fingers to her temples. There are no villains, just different views. But the audience knew better. They felt the moment something invisible snapped and reshaped the room. Ryan remained composed, but something unmistakable had shifted in him. He glanced toward the cameras, and for a split second, something, resolve, maybe, flashed in his eyes. He turned back to Joy. "And just to be clear," he said quietly, "I didn't come here to argue. I came to talk about my work. But if we're going to turn this into an interrogation about my private life, then we should stop pretending this is a regular interview." Joy stared, stunned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ryan's response was measured, careful, and frighteningly calm. "It means this conversation isn't over. Not yet." A hush, thick enough to feel, spread across the studio. The kind of silence people remember years later. A murmur rippled through the audience, unsure whether to lean in or hold their breath. Joy straightened in her chair, bracing herself. Ryan didn't avert his eyes. The tension between them hung heavy, electric. Whoopi felt it immediately. The pressure, the shift, the moment right before something collided live on air. She leaned forward, palms down, attempting to steady the atmosphere. All right, everyone, let's breathe. We have a great guest and a great show. Let's not lose the plot. But neither Ryan nor Joy broke eye contact. The plot had already slipped from her hands. Joy crossed her arms again, trying and failing to soften her tone. Ryan, you're acting like I'm attacking you. I never said you were a villain, Ryan replied, voice calm enough to be unnerving. I just told the truth. Her jaw tightened. Well, your version of the truth makes me look like the bad guy. For a moment, Ryan hesitated, emotion flickering briefly across his expression. He didn't want to fight. That much was obvious. But he wasn't about to retract what he'd said either. It's not about making you look like anything, he said quietly. It's about boundaries. And today you cross one. Joy opened her mouth, but Sunny stepped in before she could fire back. Joy, sometimes when someone tells you a question hurt them, it's okay to acknowledge that. Not everything needs a defense. I'm doing my job, Joy snapped, and Ryan is responding like a human being. Sunny answered calmly. The audience responded with another warm murmur of support. Ryan shifted, rubbing the back of his neck. For the first time, he looked tired, not physically exhausted, emotionally drained. This wasn't a glamorous premiere or a rehearsed press junket. Someone had accidentally prodded a bruise, and he chose not to pretend it didn't hurt. What no one in that studio realized, what not even the host knew, was that Ryan had walked into this interview already carrying something heavy. A late-night conversation with family, a personal situation weighing on him far more than the film he was there to promote. Joy's question had struck the one place he guarded most fiercely. He lowered his gaze to his hands, took a slow breath, and spoke softly. No theatrics, no performance, just sincerity. People assume actors develop thick skin. That fame turns you into something bulletproof. But it doesn't. If anything, it wears you down until all you have left are the things you protect the hardest. The room froze. My personal relationships, he continued, the people I care about, those aren't entertainment. They're not story beats in my career. They're real. And when you minimize them with a question like that, it hurts. A woman in the front row dabbed at tears. Joy looked startled, truly startled. For the first time, not defensive, not combative. Just taken aback, like she hadn't expected her words to actually land the way they did. Ryan, she said, voice tight, I didn't mean to hurt you, but you can't blame me for being curious. Curiosity isn't the problem, Ryan replied. It was the way you asked, Ryan said, his voice low but unwavering, as if my value as a partner or even as a person could be boiled down to decade-old gossip, like you already had your conclusion before the question even left your mouth. Sarah Haynes breathed out a soft wow, barely audible. Whoopi tapped her fingers on the table. Joy, she said gently but firmly. Sometimes we cross a line, and when we do, we acknowledge it. Happens to all of us. Joy opened her mouth, shut again, then rubbed her forehead as though trying to loosen a knot between her eyes. All right, maybe that question wasn't my finest moment. Whoopi shot her a look, one loud with unspoken instruction, urging Joy to finish the apology. But Joy didn't. Instead, she shrugged lightly and said, But I still don't think it's that big of a deal. The air shifted instantly. Those 8 words hit Ryan like a sudden strike. His head snapped up, the calm in his eyes fractured, replaced by something sharper, clearer, like a sheet of glass developing cracks from the inside. Not a big deal, he repeated quietly. Joy straightened, uneasy. Joy, Ryan continued, his tone cool and steady. You asked me on live television why my past relationships failed. That's not harmless curiosity. That's exposure. That's taking the most painful parts of someone's life and putting them under a spotlight as if they exist for entertainment. Joy shifted again, visibly rattled. I'm just asking what people want to know. No, Ryan interrupted, his voice slicing through the space. You asked something you hoped would get a reaction. A low murmur rippled through the audience. Sarah tried to intervene, offering a light laugh. Maybe we should change the subject. But Ryan didn't move. He wasn't ready to let the moment slip away, not while something unspoken still sat between them like a weight on the table. He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping. Joy, people are not entertainment. Their pain is not entertainment. Their heartbreak isn't a punchline or a segment. And I understand this show loves its big viral moments, he said, gesturing subtly to the stage. But I'm not going to sit here and let myself be turned into a tabloid headline for the sake of a reaction. Joy's face flushed in deep crimson, anger, embarrassment, confusion blending together. So you're saying I was trying to humiliate you? She demanded. Ryan didn't blink. I'm saying you forgot I was a human being. Silence slammed into the room. A heavy, suffocating hush, so absolute it felt physical. Sonny swallowed hard. Sarah looked down at the table. Whoopi closed her eyes, absorbing the blow for both of them. Then, after a breath that seemed to stretch across the entire studio, Joy finally spoke. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't defensive. It cracked, just barely. Ryan, if that's how it felt, then I'm sorry. A collective gasp burst from the audience. Not because she apologized, but because of how she said it. Soft, strained, real. Her apology was soft, almost whisper quiet, far gentler than anything Joy Behar was known for. She didn't apologize easily, and the vulnerability in her voice made the room lean in. But Ryan didn't nod, didn't smile, didn't rush to smooth the tension away. He simply looked at her with faint, bruised sadness, as if the apology had arrived a few beats too late to undo what already struck him. Thank you, he said eventually, voice low, steady. But the damage is done. Joy swallowed, the words hitting her harder than she expected. And then Ryan added something no one saw coming. But I'm still here, he said. And I'm still willing to talk, honestly, respectfully. He paused, eyes fixed on hers. If you are... That line changed the temperature of the room. The energy didn't soften. It sharpened. It tightened. It snapped electric, like the crackle in the air seconds before a summer storm breaks open. Joy stayed perfectly still, her expression unreadable, pride and vulnerability locked in a quiet war behind her eyes. And just when it seemed like the moment might finally settle, a producer began waving wildly off camera. Whoopi squinted. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Above them, the red camera light blinked twice. The network's almost never used signal. Things had spiraled too far, too fast, too unscripted. They were being thrown into an emergency commercial break. The audience gasped as the lights dipped abruptly. The show's theme music burst in, loud, clumsy, desperate, trying and failing to mask the emotional explosion that had just ripped through the table. Ryan exhaled at last, his shoulders dropping. Joy looked away, her face unreadable. But the moment wasn't over, not even close, because what happened after the cameras cut was even more intense. The studio didn't calm. It simmered. Stage managers rushed forward, offering water, whispering questions, checking on Joy, on Ryan, on the hosts whose faces looked dangerously close to cracking. Ryan sat silently, eyes fixed on the glossy surface of the desk. He looked like a man trying to gather himself piece by piece before the world started watching again. His breathing slowed, but the tension in his jaw stayed tight. He didn't seem angry anymore. He seemed exposed. Joy kept her eyes down, shrinking inward despite the chaos around her. For once, she wasn't performing. She was replaying every second of that exchange, understanding, too late, why her question had been a blow instead of banter. The air hummed, thick, electric, waiting. A voice echoed from the speakers. Back in 5, 4, 3. The lights snapped back to full brightness. The music faded. They were live. Every person watching, on set and at home, leaned forward, waiting for the slightest spark that might ignite the whole powder keg again. Whoopi straightened, forcing a smile that looked more like a shield. Welcome back. If you've been watching, things got a little heated. A few audience members laughed nervously. Joy cleared her throat, her fingers drumming anxiously against the table. Yeah, well, live TV can surprise you. Ryan didn't turn toward her. Not yet. Sarah Haynes leaned forward. Real conversations get emotional sometimes. That's okay. That's what makes this show different. Sonny nodded. But respect matters. On both sides. Joy inhaled sharply, not dismissively, but almost remorsefully. Before we move on, she said, I want to say something. The studio froze. Joy turned toward Ryan, her expression stripped of sarcasm, her eyes finally soft. I asked a question I shouldn't have asked. Not because you're a celebrity or because you can't handle real questions, but because it wasn't fair. I crossed a boundary. And I'm sorry. This time, the audience didn't gasp. They applauded. Softly at first, then swelling into a warm, sincere wave. Ryan finally lifted his eyes to hers. For a long moment, he searched her face, not for an excuse, but for sincerity. And whatever he found there loosened the tightness in his shoulders. Thank you, he said quietly. A long, collective exhale washed over the studio. Whoopi leaned back with relief. Good. That's the kind of grown-up conversation we need more of. But calm did not mean closure, because Ryan wasn't finished. He took a breath, his voice steady but touched with something rawer than before. Since we're being honest, he said, glancing briefly at the audience, I didn't expect to talk about my personal life today. And maybe that's why the question hit harder than it would have on another day. And with that sentence, the room leaned in again, because everyone could feel there was more coming. Joy listened quietly, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles paled. Ryan drew in a slow breath. Last night was difficult for my family, he said. Someone close to us had a health scare. I almost canceled today's appearance. He paused, swallowing hard. I didn't sleep. I'm exhausted. And when you're tired, your emotions sit closer to the surface. A soft murmur slid through the audience. Sympathy, surprise, a shift in understanding. Joy's eyes widened, guilt flickering clear across her face. Ryan, I didn't know. I swear I had no idea. I know you didn't, Ryan said gently. I'm not angry. I'm just human. The sentence hit the room like a subtle earthquake. Quiet but powerful. A Hollywood icon, usually polished and untouchable, sitting under studio lights admitting to fear, exhaustion, vulnerability. It changed something between him and Joy, between the hosts, even within the audience. Sarah leaned toward him, her voice almost a whisper. Thank you for sharing that. But Joy wasn't finished. She inhaled, gathering whatever courage she had left. For what it's worth, she said softly, I'm sorry I pushed you when you were already dealing with something. Truly. The sincerity on her face was uncharacteristic, real, and though Ryan didn't smile, the tension in his expression eased. Thank you, he replied, voice warm but worn. The entire table exhaled at once, like they'd all been holding the same breath for far too long. But the audience? They buzzed like a shaken beehive. Phones were raised. Hands trembled. People whispered urgently to one another, knowing, instinctively, that they had just witnessed a moment destined to blow up the internet within minutes. And they were right. As the segment continued, Joy remained noticeably subdued, respectful, measured in a way that showed she'd been rattled to her core. Ryan answered questions about his film with quiet, focused clarity. Sarah, Sonny, and Whoopi navigated each transition with careful gentleness, honoring the emotional terrain they'd all crossed together. But what happened after the final question became the part no one would forget. Whoopi wrapped the segment with a sincerity rarely seen. Ryan, thank you for being with us today. Honestly. He nodded and rose to his feet as the audience applauded. Joy stood as well, unsure whether to reach for him or give him space. Ryan made the choice for her. He extended his hand, not out of obligation, but with calm, genuine intention. Joy accepted it, shoulders lowering with relief. The audience responded with even louder applause, grateful for the grace between them. But the moment Ryan turned away, camera tracking his exit, another shift rippled through the studio. A wave of whispers, a flood of reactions, a surge of notifications. By the time he reached the edge of the stage, Twitter was detonating in real time. TikTok users were already stitching the confrontation. Comment sections boiled over. Headlines practically wrote themselves. Joy Behar crosses a line with Ryan Gosling. Ryan Gosling opens up on The View, daytime TV's most emotional moment yet. Ryan paused before stepping off stage. He turned back, not angry, not wounded, reflective, almost grateful for the raw honesty that had emerged from such messy beginnings. He nodded once toward the audience, a quiet, respectful farewell. Then he was gone. But the moment wasn't, not even close. As the audience filed out, some buzzing with adrenaline, some stunned silent, others replaying every detail, they all understood the same thing. They had witnessed something rare, unscripted, unfiltered, real, a collision that would echo for days, a moment that would divide opinion, a moment that would dominate the cultural conversation. And now the story is yours. So tell me, did Joy cross the line? Was Ryan justified in pushing back the way he did? Whose side are you on? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading every single one. And don't forget to subscribe to Celeb Clash Network for more explosive, emotional, cinematic Hollywood moments like this.